The idol smoke never stopped. Dawn after dawn, Abram watched it rise from 1,000 altars across Ur, thickening the air until the sun became a bronze disk, smothered by the prayers of men. They prayed to Nana, the moon god whose ziggurat clawed at the sky. They prayed to Inanna, to Enlil, to gods whose names multiplied like flies on meat. The whole city reeked of incense and desperation, and Abram walked through it alone. Not alone. Never truly alone, though no one else seemed to hear the voice that had first spoken to him. When even the temple fires burned low, there was one God, invisible, untouchable, real. The marketplace hummed with empire's business. Gold, lapis lazuli, slaves, all the wealth of Mesopotamia flowed through Ur. Abram moved through it, successful by any measure, yet his soul was anchored to something the market could not buy. Haran was dying. Abram's brother had died young in Ur, leaving behind a son named Lot, who now followed Abram with questions in his eyes. The boy was old enough to see that his uncle was different. A man who spoke of only one God was mad. Perhaps he was. Sarai had never conceived. 30 years of marriage, and her womb remained sealed. In a culture that measured a man's worth by his sons, Abram had wealth but no legacy. His servants whispered, his competitors gloated, and Sarai carried her barrenness like a wound that would not close, though she never spoke of it where others could hear. The morning it happened, Abram stood on the flat roof of his house, looking out over the city he had never left. Somewhere in the distance, his father Terah would already be awake, perhaps sitting among his household gods. Terah had served them faithfully. Nahor, Abram's other brother, served them still, but Abram could not. The voice came without sound, without warning, without mercy. It bypassed his ears and struck directly into his chest, his bones, the hidden place where his soul lived. Leave. That was all. At first, just the command, flat and absolute. Leave your country, your relatives, your father's house. Go to the land I will show you. Abram's hands gripped the parapet. The sun had not yet risen, but sweat poured down his back. His throat closed. A question tried to form but died before it reached his lips, because underneath the command lay something else, something vast and terrible and full of promise. I will make of you a great nation, the voice continued, and Abram heard it both as sound and as certainty, as if the future were already written into his flesh. I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse, and in you all the families of the earth will be blessed. All the families of the earth. He was 75 years old. Sarai was 65. They had no children, and now God was promising not just a son, but a nation that would bless every people under heaven. It was impossible, but when that voice spoke, rebellion was not an option. Faith was what remained when everything else burned away. He found Sarai grinding grain. She looked up, and something in his face made her hands still. He spoke to you, she said. We are leaving Ur. He has called me to a land. He will show me. What land? I don't know. He promised I will become a great nation. Through me, all peoples will be blessed. A dog barked. From the street came the morning sounds of Ur waking. All the ordinary noise that had nothing to do with the earthquake splitting their world. We have no child, Sarai said finally, and her voice cracked on the last word. How can you become a nation with no heir? But even as she said it, he saw her shoulders straighten, saw the decision form in her eyes before she spoke again. When do we leave? Telling his father was harder. Terah was old, his face a map of wrinkles, his hands shaking. When Abram found him surrounded by the household gods he had tended for decades, the old man looked up with eyes that had seen too much to be easily surprised. God has called me to leave Ur, Abram said, to go to a land he will show me. Terah studied his son's face. Then, slowly, he nodded. I will come with you. Father, you don't have to. I am old, but not dead. I have watched you turn away from the gods I served. I thought you mad. He paused, gazing at the clay figurines. Perhaps I was the mad one. If your God speaks, then I will follow. Lot needed no convincing. An adventure, he breathed. Where are we going? I don't know. But God knows. Lot laughed, the sound bright and reckless. Then we'll find out when we get there. The packing took weeks. Servants chose to stay or follow. Flocks were gathered for a journey whose length no one could guess. Sarai moved through the house, wrapping, sorting, making impossible decisions. She paused once over a box of household gods inherited from her mother. She looked at them for a long time. Then she closed the lid and left them. The neighbors watched with pity and scorn. "He's leaving everything for a dream." Some laughed. Some shook their heads. On the morning they left, the caravan stretched longer than Abram had imagined. Terah walked beside him, leaning on a staff. Sarai rode, her back straight, her eyes forward. Lot ran ahead and circled back. The servants followed. The flocks raised dust that turned the morning gold. Abram turned once at the edge of the city. Sprawled behind him, vast and ancient. His whole life was in that city, and he was walking away, following a voice into emptiness. The voice came again, soft as breath, certain as stone. "Go." Abram turned his face toward the horizon and walked into the unknown, each step an act of faith. He did not know where he was going, but he knew who had called him, and that, somehow, was enough. The land of promise. Haran held them like smoke. The city rose from the desert, another monument to the moon goddess. They had come here following everything, and somehow, the journey stalled. Months stretched into years that tasted like dust and waiting. Abram watched his father age. The journey had broken something in Terah. He sat in the courtyard staring at nothing. Sometimes he spoke of Canaan. Sometimes he said nothing at all. Sarai grew quieter with each passing season. She managed the household with practiced efficiency, her face a mask hiding whatever storms raged behind her eyes. At night, Abram felt the distance between them, like a chasm too wide to cross with words. They had believed together, but belief strained under endless waiting. The answer came before dawn. Terah died without warning, a breath taken and not released. Abram knelt beside him, feeling the absence where life had been. Grief came sharp and sudden, but beneath it ran something else. Release. The last chain to the old life had snapped. They buried Terah outside the city. Abram stood over the mound and felt the voice stir again. The same voice that had shattered his world in Ur. It had been patient, but now it spoke again, and the waiting was over. Go. The command was the same, but something had changed. Before, it had been a call. Now it was a release. Go from your country and your relatives and your father's house to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great. I will bless those who bless you, and the one who calls down evil on you I will curse, and by means of you all the families of the earth will be blessed. The promise again. Abram was 75. Sarai was 65. They had no child, yet God spoke of nations. It should have been absurd. Instead, it settled into Abram's chest like an anchor. He told Sarai the next morning. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, silence stretched. Then Sarai nodded. "Then we leave," she said, her voice carrying relief, as though she too had been waiting for this release. The preparations took weeks. Possessions were sold or given away. Most servants chose to come. Lot came without hesitation. And one morning they left Haran and turned toward Canaan. The land unfolded, harsh and beautiful. They traveled through wilderness and fields. The heat bore down. The nights brought cold. But with each mile, something in Abram loosened. This was what faith felt like when it moved. They came to Shechem when the air shimmered with heat. The land here was green, fertile, dotted with Canaanite settlements. Abram led the caravan to the big trees of Moreh and stopped. The Canaanites watched from a distance. That night, as Abram stood beneath the stars, the voice came again. Not with thunder, not with spectacle, but with the quiet certainty that had marked every divine encounter. The presence settled over him like a cloak, and he heard the words that would define his descendants for millennia. "To your offspring, I am going to give this land." Abram looked out over the landscape. The Canaanites were in the land. Cities rose from the earth. Fields were cultivated. Boundaries were established. This was not empty wilderness waiting to be claimed. It was occupied, settled, defended. Yet God had spoken. The promise was not for tomorrow or next year. It was eternal, unshakable, a covenant written into the fabric of existence itself. He built an altar there, beneath the trees of Moreh, stacking stones with his own hands until they formed a crude but solid structure. No idol crowned it. No image represented the God who had called him. The altar stood as witness, a declaration that Jehovah had appeared here, had spoken here, had claimed this land for purposes beyond Abram's understanding. Sarai came to stand beside him as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of fire and gold. "This is it?" she asked quietly. "This is the land he promised?" "Yes." Abram's voice was steady. "Though we own none of it." "And the nation?" Her hand moved to her stomach, the gesture unconscious, the old wound still raw. "How does a barren woman birth a nation?" Abram turned to face her, saw the pain and the faith warring in her eyes. "I don't know," he said, the honesty stark between them. But he spoke, and I believe him. They moved on from Shechem, traveling east to the mountainous region. Between Bethel on the west and Ai on the east, Abram pitched his tent and built another altar. Here, in the high country where the wind carried the scent of wild thyme and the view stretched to horizons that seemed to touch eternity, he called on the name of Jehovah. His voice rang out in the silence, a declaration and a prayer, an acknowledgement that everything he was and everything he would become rested in the hands of the one who had called him. Lot stood nearby, watching his uncle with something like awe. "You don't know what will happen next, do you?" the young man asked. Abram smiled, the expression weathered but genuine. "No, I don't. And yet you keep going." "Yes." Abram's gaze swept the land, this promised inheritance that was not yet his, this future that existed only in the Word of God, because he knows, and that is enough. They broke camp and continued south, journeying toward the Negeb, moving through the land in stages. Each place they stopped, Abram marked with prayer, with acknowledgement of the God who had brought him here. The Canaanites watched, some with hostility, some with curiosity, none understanding that they were witnessing the beginning of something that would outlast their cities and their civilizations. And yet, as he lay beneath the stars that night, Sarai's breathing steady beside him, and the sounds of the camp settling into sleep around him, Abram felt a peace that had eluded him in Ur, in Haran, in all the comfortable certainties of his former life. He was 75 years old, childless, landless, a stranger in a foreign country, but he had heard the voice, he had received the promise, and he had obeyed. The rest, he knew with absolute certainty, was in God's hands, and those hands, invisible though they were, held the entire world.